Good morning and welcome back to the VIP seat. Today is October 7th. I'm here in my new office in Pompano Airport. Excited to be with you guys and back down south for the summer or winter. Sorry.
Yeah. Jessie is a snowbird, for those that didn't know. She has a sweet farm that has terrible internet up in Pennsylvania. And then in the wintertime, she lives in Florida, where she has a cool office at the airport. So one of these things is not like the other. But I still have construction going on in my house. So for anybody who's listening, and if you randomly hear like banging, I'm sorry. Hey, before we get started, I have to correct the record. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the Epic E1000, and I had mentioned irresponsibly and incorrectly that it was owned by the Chinese. That is not correct. It was previously owned by a Russian businessman, Vladislav Filev of S3 Airlines. But in 2024, Tanya Eves from San Francisco purchased a majority share from the Russians. So that was my bad. My apologies. Just wanted to correct the record. We're always good here on the VIP seat to correct the record. So I apologize to the team at Epic for my misstatement, and I still love the Epic E1000, to be clear. But we're going to go ahead and jump right in. SyberJet is back, and it has returned from the dead with a stretch light jet design. So SyberJet is back from the aviation graveyard with an ambitious relaunch of their stretched SJ36 light jet. This isn't just a minor update. They're bringing back a program that many thought was dead and buried with a redesigned aircraft that promised to fill a gap in the light jet market with the range of basically a super mid. But I guess the big question is can SyberJet overcome all of the problems of the past? Morgan Freeman was a customer. So, I mean, they did get some penetration. Jessie, what do you think about the SyberJet?
Yeah, great idea. I think they're trying to compete with, Otto's new line, the Honda Echelon. That makes sense. Yeah, I also read that about Morgan Freeman. I think that's so interesting. None are in operation, by the way. All of those that were purchased, I don't think there are any that are actually flying today. But I think what's more interesting is the founder, or not the founder, the current owner of SyberJet and what he's doing. Let me just read this from the news. Trevor Melton, 42 years old, and his wife donated more than $1.8 million to a Trump re-election campaign fund less than a month before the election last year. He was also pardoned by Trump. And at Milton's trial, prosecutors say a company video of a prototype truck appeared to be driven down a desert highway was actually a video of a non-functioning Nikola that had been rolled down a hill. So, interesting.
Yep, he got convicted with wire fraud and a bunch of other stuff. I mean, it's I'm not going to lie, if you're looking for a character to lead the SyberJet out of questionable success, which is like basically none, I'm not 100% sure this is the right guy to do it. His last startup, which was a transportation startup, was like a total fraud, and he took orders from some like very big publicly traded companies and touted, and I think they were even public or maybe pseudo public, like they're raising all this money. Yeah, they were public. That's right. I mean, look, here's a quote from Milton from the news story. This is from AIN. We'll link it in the newsletter. "If someone doesn't take me seriously, that's to their own detriment," Milton said. "That's okay. I had some really dark days. It was tough. 5 years of the worst 5 years a human can ever go through. I was indicted for something I didn't do. I was framed. We found emails from the executives where they were framing me to take my stock away from me. They lied to the government. They provided false information. The government indicted me because they wanted to attack free speech, and Trump came in and gave me a full and unconditional pardon. His Department of Justice looked into it, and they said it was one of the worst cases they've ever seen. If I had $1 for every time I heard the Trump administration say this was the worst I've ever seen, I'd be able to buy a SyberJet." He was absolutely innocent. He did nothing wrong. I mean, to get wording like that from the DOJ and the President of the United States is an honor of a lifetime.
Yeah, look, I guess we don't really know. We weren't there, but it's certainly an interesting past for someone. But he would not be the first entrepreneur slash founder in private aviation to have gone to jail and have had securities fraud issues in the past. So who knows? Maybe we'll see a SyberJet in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be a SyberJet stan. Like, I'm going to be honest, but the problem is that it's like 4.71 feet wide and 4.3 feet tall. Like, that's tiny. I mean, that's Honda Jet size, like Phenom 100 size.
Yeah.
The range is great. I mean, that's kind of cool. And it has a no emissions, it has an APU for a very light jet, which is cool.
I think they're also doing their own avionics. They said they weren't able to make a good deal. So I believe that was in one of the things. That's a lot to chew off, on top of manufacturing your aircraft to now start doing your own major components as well. It's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. And I mean, look, some of these stats are like bonkers. SJ36's MMO is projected to be Mach 0.88 with a long range cruise of Mach 0.74, which is like kind of fast, but not super fast. Maximum altitude is the same as the SJ32's at flight level 490. That's up there.
Yeah.
And then a 12 psi cabin differential at flight level, it gives you sea level cabin at flight level 410. That would be the lowest cabin altitude of any aircraft, period.
Yeah, well, I think he still needs a few $1 billion to get this done. So let's see where we end up.
That's fair. Hopefully he can, go tap the other guys like, hey, look, I know the other thing didn't work out, but I got this new thing.
Now I got a good idea.
And it's cool. Yeah, no kidding.
As if electric trucks weren't difficult enough. Now we've got airplanes. So
yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, let's take like a pretty regulated industry and then let's like next that. And then we're going to 10x the size of the company. Look, he also, Trevor Milton comes from that era of entrepreneurs. Like Elizabeth Holmes was kind of in his like cohort of like coming up through the ranks. Like, unfortunately, that whole generation of entrepreneurs, like not the whole thing, but a lot of them, the Firefest guy, Elizabeth Holmes, Trevor Milton, whether he did it or not, right? He at least got accused. So, there's a lot of craziness going on there. If you're going to push the truck off the hill and make it look like literally I remember them nationally broadcasting this, like, oh my gosh, look at the Nikola truck go. And it literally wasn't on. Like it was just a chassis that was rolling down the hill. That's crazy. A rock rolling downhill doesn't pick up moss, something like that, but it does pick up some jail time, I guess. Well, that's going to bring us into the Mile High Madness segment where Jessie and I go to the internets and we find you some of the best social media posts that are out there in business, private, commercial aviation. And Jessie, I think you've got a good one for the audience here.
Yes, absolutely. So if it involves animals and private jets, I'm going to share it immediately because why not? But this is Fifi Little Darling's Instagram page. She's been flying around. So this dog's entire page is flying on aircraft, usually in first class, around the world. She's got like 50,000 followers, but that's all this little dog does. But for some reason, she was flying in a private jet this week. I don't know. Is this a Latitude? What do you think this thing is?
So the like 4-place conference in the back makes me think it's like Falcon 2000-ish. Like the windows are not Gulfstream, but you've got the width. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Falcon 2000 something. It's got winglets, so it's got to be the. This is my total nerdness coming out.
See, winglets, I'm not a good.
I don't think there's winglets on the Falcon 2000 Classic, so it'd have to be a little bit newer. There's somebody in the comments who is correcting me right now. They're actually screaming at their TV saying, "No, it's whatever." But that's gonna be my guess. It's not wide enough to be like a large cabin. Maybe. No, it wouldn't be a 605. The wing's too out there. But
it looks pretty new too, and it didn't look like a retrofit. Like those are like the new manufacturer seats.
Yeah, for sure. It was very nice.
But I want to be Fifi's mom. Can I do that? Can I just have a page where I fly privately with my dog, and that's all we do?
Yeah, I feel like Fifi's mom's probably doing pretty well on Fifi's Instagram. Like she's obviously affording private jets. I mean, maybe Fifi's like rev share paid for the private jet. That'd be cool.
Genius.
And as a tax write-off, I mean,
a tax write-off
because that's business, right? You have your dog and you're taking videos, and so there's a tax write-off.
She's an influencer. That's what she does.
Exactly. Mine is a bit of NBAA comedy. So this is from Colin Dunn. Colin Dunn's with Jetcraft. He's a good friend of mine, and he and I actually met at NBAA base a few years ago. And so this is what makes me very sad. But he puts, everybody's posting this exact same Instagram and Facebook post. I'm guilty of it. I put it on LinkedIn. But he put, I'm not attending NBAA base with the slant face. Like he put a carrot in there and put not, which is pretty funny. I mean,
It's
if
hilarious.
if you're gonna get legs for the post, I mean, that's a great way to do it.
Oh,
He's got
yeah.
a family trip that's coming up, so he's prioritizing family. He just got married in South Africa, and I'm still waiting for my invite. I must have gotten left in the mail, but I did have some friends that went, and so he'll be at a couple of other events. Colin, and Colin is a listener of the VIP seat, so we appreciate you, Colin, for listening and sharing our stuff. But we're sad that you won't be at NBAA, but I'm sure we will see you at one of the many other events that we have that end in AA around, but not that kind of AA.
That is a good reminder, too. We actually will be recording an episode of the VIP seat at base this year, so keep an eye out for that. We'll send out links and news. You can even maybe stand by and watch the show as it's being recorded.
Yeah, send us a message. We'll let you know where it is. Sign up for the newsletter. We'll probably just send out a massive blast. Say, hey, this is where we're going to be.
Yep. All right. So, in more serious news, less of our mile high fun, the Hoppajet crash that happened in 2024 was a Challenger 604 that landed on the highway. I think everybody knows about this incident. Fortunately, passengers made it out alive. Fatality of the crew. There were 2 fatalities of the crew members. This has gotten really interesting, just from a legal and investigative standpoint. The investigation is not complete yet. But what it's looking like is that there are some corrosion issues with the engine. Hundreds of pages to read on this thing, and by no means is the report done. But what's interesting now is that Hoppajet's actually suing GE and Bombardier over this corrosion issue that caused a power loss in both engines, which is absolutely crazy. But this is getting interesting and a little disturbing that this can even happen.
Yeah, there is. I read one of the articles that came out, not the one that we're talking about specifically here about suing GE, but I did read one of the articles that talked about it actually showed the interviews from the I think it's the NTSB report. It's either NTSB or DOT, somebody, one of the letter agencies did interviews, and basically they were saying, like, yeah, we heard the pilots basically say, shoot, we're going down. And the flight attendant was like, get into the brace position. And that was it. I mean, it was really, really quick. And it's all revolved around this hung start problem,
Yes.
which apparently, now that that has come out, you almost have this like entire group of 605 pilots, 604, 605 pilots going, oh yeah, I have that problem too sometimes. Like you just kind of restart it and it works.
Yeah.
And obviously, this one turned out to be fatal. And I don't know, it's a interesting, I mean, I'd be curious to see what this, what actually comes of this. I think that, you've got 2 giant companies trying to sue each other. And is it over, like, obviously it's over financial, but it's also like, this is more of like Bombardier is going to have brand damage done by this. And they're trying to basically say, look, it was GE that is to blame. So I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, you've read a lot of the reports. What, like, this is not legal advice. This is not FAA advice, just to be clear. But what were some of the big things that you pulled out of it?
So again, I'm not a mechanic, and this is starting to get into a really, really technical area in terms of like what's going on with those engines in particular. But just based on context of what the case is laying out and what's already in the report so far, there was a service bulletin issued for similar engines regarding corrosion. There was some sort of veining system that they did identify post crash had major corrosion. And there's an argument now between the operator and GE regarding washes. For those who don't know, you do need to wash your air compressors. You need to wash your engines out, especially if you're operating in very corrosive environments. And that includes South Florida, where it's humid, salty air. If you've ever lived in Florida, you know, anything you put outside after 1 year is like destroyed. That's exactly what happens to the parts of engines as well. So there's an argument between GE not mandating a regular wash schedule for the engines versus operators just kind of like knowing when to do it or when not to. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens in this case and what's going to happen in general to engines in the future, because there might be more, you know, mandates from OEMs coming out saying you need to wash every month if you're in South Florida. Usually it's reserved for, you know, firefighting or really corrosive environments. Maybe South Florida now becomes one of those corrosive environments as well. Or even New York, you know, anywhere with smog, anywhere with salt air, those are all pretty harsh environments. But it's just crazy. I can't believe it happened to both engines. But in this case, there were actually 7 incidents from what I read here of hung starts in this specific aircraft from 2000 to 2004. And there's an accusation that GE told them to change the fuel filter and didn't say it could be a corrosive problem. So there's no telling where this is going to end up. There's still way more that we need to know, but it's a very different case than we're used to seeing.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think that, you know, 3 weeks before the crash, I mean, you're talking about the hung engine thing. You know, January 15th, which was 3 weeks before the crash, basically HoppaJet grounded a plane and said, "Hey, this specific plane," and said, "Hey, how do we troubleshoot this?" And it's like, you know, you kind of have this back and forth, and so there's just like a lot of finger pointing. It's just really unfortunate because it's, you know, it's like there was at the very beginning, there's a lot of consideration of like pilot error, right? Like there's from my understanding, again, not a pilot, not a mechanic, but there is a fuel selector valve that you can screw up.
Right. Everyone was pointing that, but not
everybody's
the case.
Pointing at that. And it's like, this comes out and it's like, you haven't even heard. There obviously was something that said that, hey, that's totally debunked. You know, and if it's a core fundamental underlying issue, I mean, there's a lot of 605s.
It's just so wild to have both engines have an issue. I mean, you know, statistically speaking, just like seems almost impossible. But on this aircraft, I mean, like you said, the 3 weeks before there was a hung start issue, not only on one, but both engines within 30 seconds of each other, which is it's just unbelievable. You know, and I think that may be part of the error chain here, is that just like, oh, that can't happen, you know, but apparently things can. But again, we got a lot more to see on this investigation, and we'll see what the NTSB comes up with and where the lawsuit goes. It's going to be an interesting one to watch for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to look up and see how many Challenger 605s there are out there. Like how many aircraft could be affected by this.
Well, it's how many aircraft have that engine?
There's 287 Challenger 605s. Was it a 605 or 604? 4.
I don't know if the engine's the same or not on both of those.
Yeah, I don't know. We'd have to look that up. But like, look, there's like, the reality is like, this is hundreds of aircraft that could be affected by this. Residual value, like there's a lot of things that, come in through this. So I don't know. I think, let's let the NTSB report play out. We are not armchair quarterbacks or what is it? Monday morning quarterbacks, but
nor engine experts in any way. So please, this is not. This is just speculative and looking at the context here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're going to move on to our next story, and the FAA, unfortunately, is over budget and years behind schedule. Surprise, surprise! The government effective and efficient again.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about, there seems to be some kind of like push for certain agencies, FAA going over to the DOT, funding, maybe not being fully under the control of FAA, maybe privatized. And I think this all plays into that story. But the Office of the Inspector General came out with an audit of the NextGen program and said that despite spending, $15 billion since 2003,
with
the FAA has
$15 billion with a B, by the way.
The FAA has only achieved 16% of the projected benefits that it was supposed to from the NextGen program, which is not a shocker, but man, that's a big number.
Yeah, to be that, if you like quantified that, 16%, Like you're gonna have to do 5 times that. This is gonna be knocking on $100 billion project, and it's like not even close to there. I mean, I think one of the big questions is like it was all this like, oh yeah, it's great, like this next gen node. I think what the NOTAM system like maybe just showed signs of life like last week.
Yes. Yeah, that was the other piece of news, FAA, that, they're overhauling the NOTAM system and they just released the beta version for people to test. It's getting some positive feedback, but it is still in all caps, which is disappointing.
Yeah, several key program. I mean, I'm just reading a few pieces out of this. Several key programs have been pushed to 2030 or later. The FAA has reduced the number of airports slated to receive upgrades by about 40. So they've reduced the amount of airports by 45% and cut back on the scope of program capabilities. Like this is bonkers. I mean, the fact that the American like FAA ATC system is so bad at this like is just it's very frustrating, but it's also kind of like you can't help but laugh. Like, to put into perspective, in July we celebrated because lawmakers passed $12.5 billion for ATC modernization, but the FAA NextGen currently has spent $6.5 billion more than that and is only like 16% of the way through. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. And look, I don't even blame leadership at FAA because, quite frankly, leadership changes all the time because it's political, and that's kind of one of the things that we've been talking about in other shows is, how do we de-bureaucrat or make less bureaucratic the FAA so you can actually get projects like this done, long-term capital projects. They're very hard to do in a bureaucratic system like the FAA, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, you have a system that is overburdened with change. And so you have
Mm-hmm.
all of this leadership turnover, which creates burden on the system, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
they can't do their job if they're in a constant state of change. And so they're settling, and then it's like, oh yeah, cost overruns and things like that. I just think that, like, it's just frustrating because in the private sector, like, if you threw that much money at something in the private sector, like, can you imagine the amount of value that you could create? Whereas in the public sector, you're not creating, like, you've created 16% of the value and benefits that you were anticipating, which this was your whole budget. You're like now over budget. And, like, but in the private sector, if you did this, like, can you imagine how much better it could be because you align your incentives, and the incentives are not like keep your bureaucratic job, but instead it's like do something cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
then again, sometimes you get things like Trevor Milton where, you know, some curious
It can
activities
go either
happen.
way.
Yeah, it can definitely go either way. But I will say, I don't know. This is like me personally. I'm on neither side of the issue currently. Like, I'm totally to be convinced on the privatization of ATC and of
Mm-hmm.
other things in the FAA. But frankly, stuff like this definitely pushes me towards the privatization camp personally.
And rest assured, this is going to be used as a political football for the people who do want the privatization. As well, look, we told you so. So, for those who are fighting it, good luck. It's going to be a tough challenge.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Well, moving on to our next story. Listeners, longtime listeners of the show will know that I have referenced an imaginary M&A gong. Well, I am proud to present the VIP M&A gong. If you're watching on YouTube, you've seen it all show over my shoulder over here. But we are going to ring the M&A gong for Leviate Air Group, which continues their expansion and have purchased Vault Aviation acquisitions. So here comes the inaugural ringing of the gong on the VIP seat.
See. Now, this is how you know you've made it in this industry. If you get that tiny little gong celebrating your great acquisition. Congrats, Leviate. We're proud of you and your Vault acquisition. Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am friends with some of the guys at Leviate, and they have been on an M&A tear. So this time last year, for those of us in the industry, October 31st, give or take, or October 21st, give or take. It's about 2 weeks forward from today. They bought a majority interest in Chairman Aviation, which is an operator, And now they have purchased Vault Aviation, which is a charter broker. So Leviate has three arms, right? Aircraft sales, they have charter brokerage, and then charter management. So kind of three different, three-legged stool. This bolsters the team on the charter brokerage side. So we have operator kind of got bolstered last year. Now we've got the charter broker that's getting added to here. And an interesting synergy here is that Vault traditionally has focused on professional athletes, and Leviate has not had a huge part of that market. They've really focused more business travelers and things like that. And this is more kind of in the professional athlete scale. So it allows them to, kind of expand their brokerage market. But Jessie, what do you think about this move?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And again, that three-legged stool concept, I think people underestimate how different each kind of one of these segments is: aircraft management versus charter broker versus, actual charter operations. They're three very unique kinds of businesses. So to consolidate them makes sense, especially consolidating customer lists, marketing funds. I think it's great news. And again, a lot of acquisitions happening. So that's very optimistic for the industry. And I think it shows.
Yeah. I would imagine that charter brokerage does not trade at crazy EBITDA multiples. I mean, if I'm going to just guess, I'm going to say like four-ish, maybe. If you're going to pay up for a premium book, maybe six.
Yeah, I think 2 to 6, depending on the size and scale of the operation. The problem is, it's a customer relationship, and unless you have like really long-term contracts, or, the owner is also, someone who's going to stay on with those customer relationships. Customer relationships are so fluid, so that you can't really buy a lot of that. I think, buying infrastructure like mechanics and operations, or even management companies, technology, like those are all pieces of the valuation puzzle, and just brokerage and no tech piece and no anything else is tough to make sense from a value perspective.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that it's more of like a strategic partnership.
Mhm.
Wouldn't be surprised if there was some equity role. I mean, I think that those types of, I think that if the founder of the acquired brokerage is kind of coming in and roll some equity, I think that could make sense.
Yeah.
Basically, you value both entities, and you say, okay, well, the sum of the parts is this, and so we're going to roll 20% equity of you into here. I don't know how the deal is structured from like a capital standpoint, but that would be how I would guess that it would go down, or at least that's how I would suggest for people to structure those types of deals, especially in the high touch relationship driven service industry such as charter brokerage or aircraft brokerage. Like, you have to get to so much scale before these things like actually have institutional appetite, where it's like more of a machine. I mean, you think of like air charter service, or you think of, kind of those like kind of big institutional level behemoths. Like,
Yeah.
that's one thing. But a lot of times these brokerages are like, oh yeah, Vinny over there in the corner, yeah, he landed all the New York like baseball players because his cousin
Mm-hmm.
is like a
Right, there's some
manager for whatever,
relationship,
right?
and
And it's like,
yeah.
yeah, it's like, how do you quantify that? I don't know. Like, that's just
And too,
tough.
those customers are so sticky. Even, when I was the president of Grandview and we had, 200 something employees, I still had customers that would only talk to me. Like, you can't unload
Yeah,
those
exactly.
relationships to other people sometimes. It's like, once that customer trusts you, very hard to separate from that relationship, especially those that like to get deals on every flight and constantly bug you and make you crazy.
Exactly.
Don't miss those
Yeah,
days.
there's a few people that are out there that are like, oh, yep, feel you on that. So
Yeah.
cool. Well, our last story of the day does not bring the gong because it's news that I think everybody already knew.
Yeah.
But Gulfstream has finally unveiled the long-awaited G300. So there is a super mid with oval windows for the first time ever, and I think that's probably one of the more exciting parts of this announcement.
Yeah, it's the longest super mid now that will
So,
be on the market. By how many feet?
yeah, like we're not. I mean, not much. I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
like just a little bit. So for those that didn't know, the Gulfstream G300 has replaced the Gulfstream G280, which was the previous super mid model for Gulfstream. one of the big qualms with the 280 was, oh, it must not be a Gulfstream because it doesn't have the oval windows. Well, they said, okay, well, we fixed that. They updated the avionics. They gave it some more fuel efficiency and like legs. So like you get a little bit more range out of the G300. The biggest surprising piece was no flat floor. And in a category that is dominated by flat floor competitors in the Challenger 3500 and the Praetor 500 and 600, and even arguably the Falcon 2000, all have flat floors. The G300 does not have a flat floor, which I don't know. It's interesting. I'm not sure if that's going to be a big miss in the long run or not.
I don't think it will. I think Gulfstream customers are Gulfstream customers, and like once you're like locked in, that's the aircraft that you want. You just got to pick what size, you know. But it's I have problems with them saying it's an all new aircraft when really it's just like a little bit longer and some different windows than the 280. But that's what so many of these manufacturers are doing. You know, we went from legacy to Praetors, and it's like every 7 to 8 years they just have to update the brand and make it a little bit different and call it something else.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that the oval windows thing is a genuine something to point out. I mean, you can now have a super mid with oval windows, whereas before you had to go to the G450 before you got the oval windows, kind of from a size standpoint. I think personally, and I've seen a few people speculate about this, I think the G300 is going to help them sell a lot more G400s, because from a price point standpoint, they're not that far off now, or when they come into service, right? So like the G300 is not coming to service until like between 27 and 29. So you're talking about like, we're talking about a long way down the road. But if you're going to compare the G400, which is really going to be a real gap filler between the ultra long range, or kind of the long range G500, which does does Europe really easily. But you're like, oh, well, I'll just do the G400 because it's going to be more comparable, give me a little bit more range, a little bit more payload, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I hope they can sell a lot of G300s, but I think the flat floor, my opinion is that I think that the flat floor miss is going to, I think it's going to cause them a lot more heartache, because other than the corporate flight departments, which is Gulfstream's core customer, I think the average retail consumer is going to go Praetor over a G300 if that's the difference.
Yeah, it's a totally different feel when you walk in the aircraft, for sure. I can see that. Again, Gulfstream customers are loyal customers, and once you're hooked, you're in it for the lifetime.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Well, this has been another episode of the VIP seat, which is designed to help you on your commute to work or on your commute home from work. It's 30 minutes, the top 5 stories in business aviation. The best way to help this show grow is by hitting the share button and texting it to 1 or 2 friends. We want industry people. We love it. Joe Keel, who we read her review a couple of weeks ago, said that she shares with everybody at Embraer. So if you're at a manufacturer or you're at a operator, be sure to send this around, because everybody needs to know more about business aviation and more about what's going on. It makes you smarter. It helps when you can say, hey, did you hear about XYZ? They say, no, I didn't. I'd never heard of that. So you seem smarter to your friends. And then when you share it, they can also seem smarter to their friends. And it's great. It's a great network effect. Go like and subscribe on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Leave us a 5-star review. And if you write the review, we read it live on the air. We're going to read one right now. This one is from Sean Dardo, who works for me. It says, very insightful, Preston and Jessie. Thank you, Sean. You're not fired. So congratulations. Had you written something critical? Not so sure. Just kidding.
I'm going to make sure my mom writes one
Sean's
next
great.
week, too.
But thank you for that 5-star review, Sean. Yeah, exactly. Jesse's mom. My cousin who has no idea about anything about private aviation. It'll be great. It'll be fun. We can all hang out. So, but yeah, so go leave us a 5-star review. And again, like we said last week, this is your chance to get a free ad read in the VIP seat by leaving us a 5-star review. And then whatever you want to put in there, you can put in there. Welcome to Bob's Garage, where you can get your oil change for real cheap, right? Put in there whatever you want to. And so subscribe to the newsletter, thevipseat.com. SyberJet.com, where we will send you the newsletter, this exact same 5 stories in a digestible format that you can read and click on links and read deeper. Follow Jessie on LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter too. We'll have our links all in the show notes and all of that kind of stuff. But we will see you next week on the VIP seat.